Hello, Super Beanie Man here, and welcome back to another Demo Disc Days, which I haven't done for quite a while on this channel. And today's episode is going to be different because I'm going to be talking about my favourite issue of official UK PlayStation magazine, and that is, of course, issue 42 from February 1999. And it's my favourite one because it was an absolute beast of an issue which contained the very first review of Metal Gear Solid in the UK, and this was a game that I kind of was aware of because I was seeing previews in this magazine, but this was the first time where I could see it fully, and the game actually had a demo disc for it on this very magazine's disc, so it was a huge demo as well. It contained the docks, the helipad area inside the base. I think you got right up to like the DARPA chief, so it was quite a meaty demo. But let's get on with the magazine itself. So as we open it, we can see a really cool looking Crash Bandicoot 3 warped poster, and then if we go on to the next page, we can see the contents. As you can see, there's quite a lot to this magazine. It was a pretty cool magazine, to be fair. There's over 150 pages, so it's fairly decent for its size. And it actually cost $4.99. So they always used to say that it was $2.50 for the mag and $2.50 for the demo. And to be honest, it's quite a decent price, to be fair. It's definitely worth it back then. Nowadays, with the magazine, you don't actually get a demo disc with it. It's just usually some free tat, so it's not quite as value for money. But back in the day, in the early 90s, this was a great magazine to get. So as we look onto this next page, you can see there's a bit of an issue that they were having at the time with Square Enix games coming, well, Squaresoft's games back then, coming to the UK. There seemed to have been a bit of a problem with it. So there was a load of games that were like held up. The last Square game published was Bushido Blade over a year ago, so there was still Parasite Eve and a bunch of others to still release in this country. Because back then, you'd have to wait years sometimes to get a game that was made and released in Japan, and even America sometimes. But the real interesting thing for me on this page is the black box in the corner where Wolverine is still standing, as it's here where I would have first realised that Activision were actually making a 3D Spider-Man title. And it's funny here because they often say whether it will appear in time to take on the Titus Superman game, which actually was terrible in the end. And the Spider-Man game on PS1 is one of my favourite superhero and games on the system, so it's quite interesting to see that was probably how I first sort of noticed that it was coming out. And I think I probably saw it and was like, oh my god, a Spider-Man game, that is brilliant, I can't wait. So yeah, that was one of the things I thought was pretty cool with that page. So moving on the next page, we have a preview of Driver, and we can also see Wipeout 3 as well, so that must have been coming out around that time. So Wipeout was a cool game, but Driver is the one that I'm kind of interested in looking at, because they sort of say that it's going to be released by GT Interactive, and it's looking remarkable, they say. The title involves driving and plenty of it. In some ways, it bears comparison with Grand Theft Auto. You bomb around a city, getting missions from other characters while avoiding the long arm of the law. And then they say, well, GTA was a visual shambles, Driver looks to be a beautiful beast. And to be fair, to its credit, Driver 1 was absolutely amazing if you could get past the car park tutorial level where you learnt all the moves, that is. But yeah, it was a really cool game, to be fair. The sequels, though, kind of didn't really live up to the glory of this game. It was like a one and done almost, to be fair, because 2 was disappointing, and then all the other ones that came after it were just kind of forgettable. So yeah, it goes on to sort of say that you play as Tanner, an undercover cop, posing as a getaway driver in your efforts to do blah-de-blah. Each of the 4 cities boasts 20 to 30 miles of road and around 150 buildings, all depicted in high res. Wow. The game looked awful. I remember the pedestrians just looked terrible. And also on there as well, I just wanted to point out, Rugrats' Search for Reptiles budget for marketing is multi-million pounds from THQ, which is probably why that company ended up failing. So on this next one, I thought this bit down here was cool, this raving retrospective bit, because there's loads of pictures that people have sent in, and one of particular interest is number 5, which is a Parappa the Rapper wedding. So a guy actually got dressed as Parappa the Rapper, and basically they just say the reason for that. Well, they got £1,000 from the PlayStation magazine, and there's some pretty decent tattoos of Lara Croft as well, but I don't think much of that PlayStation logo on the back of that guy's head. Jesus. Okay. So yeah, that's that page, to be fair. Moving on, we've got some other random sort of pages. This hot and cold meter here on this page on the left there is quite interesting, because it was something that I noticed at the time when I was watching telly, and they actually pointed it out here in the blue bit for the cold bit. So basically they say that EastEnders, the soap from the UK, is getting it wrong by showing Sprogs play Spyro as a 2-player game. So this was a scene that I remember watching. It was the DeMarcos, it was Teresa and I think Bepe's kid, and they were playing Spyro, and they both had a pad in their hand pretending to play it, but when it cut to the screen of the telly, you could blatantly just see that it was just one character controlling Spyro. There was no split screen, and I always just thought that was so dumb. Okay, so on the next couple of pages, it's just usual stuff. But here is a cool bit that I really liked. It's the It Should Be a Game section. So this is basically where readers could send in their ideas for games. And usually they'd be so crazy, sort of weird ones. It'd be little kids drawing it with crayons and they would look terrible. And I did actually try and send one in at one point. It was called a Paperboy game, but it wasn't like Paperboy. It was more of like an action survival horror sort of thing where you were just the Paperboy. That was your job, basically. And you had the bike, and that was your weapons, the papers at the start. It was terrible, but I was only like in year 7, so I was probably only like 12 years old, 13 years old, so I was still young. But yeah, that was always a cool bit that I liked just seeing every time. So yeah, there's a paparazzi game there, and then some sort of mountain climbing game. Weird. So yeah, moving on, we just got some couple of random pages. Any CDs for any 5 CDs? Bloody hell, or cassettes, still selling cassettes. This was a cool page. So these that I noticed when I came back to look at this, just for the merch here. And one of the particular ones that I like is the Oddworld mugs. Well, beer pint glasses, just really cool. And there's also a Resident Evil 3 comic here as well. In fact, it might even be Resident Evil 2, I think. So yeah, that was a cool bit to look at. Moving on, we just got some random stuff, some football stuff. Who is Infograms? So that's just introducing to you to the dev. This one here was quite a funny one that I wanted to point out. So this is a university challenge where people are having a Tekken 3 challenge like at King's College SU in London. And one of the things that I thought was just funny is just some of the photos of these people. I mean, it'd be really interesting to see if anyone knew who these people were, or if it's you're watching this video and you're seeing yourselves. I bet that's quite freaky. And it's just letting people play Tekken 3 for the first time and getting their opinions on it. And a lot of people just say the usual stuff like it looks a lot better than Tekken 2. It looks easy for beginners, hard for pros. He enjoys smacking the mates. But this one here I thought was quite funny. The Nurse Philippa one, because it says Hainachi is a sexy fella. Now I'm not sure whether that's a spelling mistake from the mag or if that guy did call him Hainachi, but I just picture some baked beans with this weird sort of spiky hairdo. It's just so weird. So yeah, moving on, we've got an advert, and then we've got a couple of page spread on Ridge Racer Type 4. So this was a game that I think I played the demo when it eventually appeared on the magazine, but it wasn't really one that I was interested in. The driving games didn't really hold my interest that much back in the days. I didn't play Gran Turismo until the third one on PS2, but this is like a cool little spread showing you some footage, and the game does actually look really nice for PlayStation 1. You can tell it's definitely pushing the system to its limits at the sort of end of its sort of life cycle. And then there's an interview with some of the devs who worked on it, the director, the programmer, art director, sound designer, and cutscene designer. And it's kind of interesting, to be fair. They talk about how much research went into the Ridge Racer 4 driving experience, and they mentioned that they didn't race on circuits or drive in any real cars or anything like that. They said they all like cars on the team and they've driven them for years, so they have a good knowledge of how they work and things like that. And they did drive a couple of cars, like a 4-wheel drive, to see how that would run. However, they made a they always say they made a racing game and not a simulation. So the reason behind this is that when you drive a real car, you can see things like G-force and speed increasing and tyres gripping and so on. And at the moment, they didn't feel it was possible to simulate this feeling in a game on the PlayStation. So they went for that more arcadey style. And I think that's quite cool to sort of see and sort of think about of what they could do at the time. They also get asked if there was anything they wanted to do but couldn't. And they sort of say that they succeeded in doing everything they wanted to. And someone mentioned the sky has different daylight effects depending on the direction you approach the sun, also showing distant mountain roads. And initially they thought they wouldn't be able to do things like that. And they also actually made a weird sort of controller for it, the Joy-Con or Jog-Con. I can't really... Jog-Con, whatever the hell that is. And it has a curious looking sort of circular pad on top of it that allows you to move it with your fingers, which is weird. Anyway, moving on, we've got a couple of previews. We also have this one for Prince Naseem boxing. So he was like a famous boxer of the time, and there's actually a game made with his name on it and his likeness by Codemasters. It was coming out of March that year, and it's kind of just cool to see it, really. And again, they sort of talked with the devs about this, and they sort of mentioned, like, did Naseem actually have much to do with the actual development of the game, or whether he's just getting the paycheck and going. And they said that he had full approval, and that he came to the studio, he spent a day playing the game, and he didn't want to leave by the end of it, and he was giving them insights of showing them some punching moves that he can do. So that's kind of cool to see. And he also talked about how he asked them to make sure that his leopard skin shorts, which he was famous for wearing, actually had the Adidas stripes down the side of them, which is kind of random. They also talk about the lack of moves in a game because it's boxing compared to something like Tekken, and whether that daunted them. And they just sort of say that, well, it's a boxing game, so there's not going to be any fireballs or kicks. It's about what boxing is and how that would work well in a video game. It comes down to a few combinations and defense moves that you can do. So yeah, that's kind of cool. Next up we have of interest for me is a Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver preview. So this was a game that I never brought, but a friend had it, so I did get to play a bit of it, and it was always a cool looking game. I liked how you could change the rounds and switch between the two sort of worlds. And one of the cool things I thought here was kind of funny is how they mentioned that Raziel can grab and pull and push and throw blocks in any sort of direction, comparing it to how stiff it was in the Tomb Raider games of the day. So that was kind of funny to see that was like a big selling point, that you can move an object around freely instead of like on a grid like it was with Tomb Raider. And then again, it just talks about the game and how it sort of works and what the story is and what you kind of got to be doing in there. And it's just kind of fun to see, really. I think it's kind of cool to look back and see these sort of things. So they mentioned like the combat as well. So they were sort of worried that it would be a Fighting Force kind of 3D sort of fighting where it just locks on and it feels awful. But they sort of mentioned that you can lock onto a target by pressing R1, and you'll always face the nearest foe. And when you enable you to like both bob and weave around with a D-pad, and then thump and kick with the punch and face buttons. So it's kind of got some sort of combat systems there which you've sort of seen develop early on in like the 3D games. It's by no means anywhere near like the coolness of like an Arkham game where you can freeform and punch in any sort of direction that you want where an enemy is, kind of thing. But you can see that it's kind of that sort of mechanic is kind of taking shape in games like this as early as the PlayStation 1 days. So I think that's pretty cool. And again, they mentioned the whole new world aspect where you can morph between rounds, and that's been done in a few games. Like Dishonored did that in one of the games, and there was another one where you could switch between the past and present kind of thing. So that's kind of cool. Moving on, we've got a couple of more games that I don't really care about, but I wanted to point out this one here, the adverts for Gran Turismo and Tekken 3. So back in like the late 90s, Sony were killing it with the adverts, the printed adverts. Remember that girl with a weird face? And these two are just ones that I thought were kind of cool. So another thing that I thought was kind of funny and of its time was this page here with this tank racer preview, and then this cheat section here where you can actually basically just call in for like a cheat hotline. But before I talk about that, I'm going to just talk about the points on this tank racer. So it looks terrible. And the minus point that they put here was visually it's uninspiring and flaccid like an old sausage. So they're kind of harsh on it. And they said the good things were single player just sits the right side of tricky, The handling is basic but pleasant, and rotating turrets offer violent laughs. So yeah, you can kind of tell that it's probably not going to get a good review score when that comes in a couple of months' time. They say it's the kind of title which needs championing and could well go on to be a minor hit. The limp eye candy won't do it any favours. And talking about limp eye candy, well, Lara Croft's arse is nothing but, to be honest. So let's take a look at this cheat page. So yeah, it's basically just an 0800 number that you can call in. Oh shit, my screen's going a bit weird there. An 0800 number that you can call in and get cheats. And the calls cost 60p a minute at all times. And a call will last no longer than 5 minutes. If you reach that 5-minute limit and you still haven't got all your cheat codes that you wanted, it's going to cut you off. And basically they just got loads of cheat codes for a game, but I don't know why anyone would do that. I mean, I had friends ring me up about Metal Gear Solid and how to get off the roof where the hind D is, because they didn't realise they had to get the rope, and I told them about that. But I would never ever think of ringing a cheat hotline like this, because what an absolute rip-off. If you're buying the magazine and you're seeing this advert, then there's cheats at the back of this magazine. Just use those. I don't know why anyone would do it, but thankfully I don't think this is a thing that sort of happens nowadays. Ay. Weird times, man. So moving on, we've got a few more games, and then we got another sort of cool feature about the NetEuros, which was the sort of black PlayStation, the dev kit, where people could just make their own games through this sort of system. And this magazine actually has a bunch of games on the demo for your NetEuros. It's basically one big NetEuros disc, which was really cool. And while for the most part these games are just terrible, there was a couple of good, really classic cool titles that I really enjoyed playing, such as Rocks and Gems, which once the page loads properly, you'll see it at the bottom there. It was a really cool sort of dig-dug type game, and it was 2D and it looked terrible, but it was really addictive, and I remember spending a lot of time playing it. Another one that I kind of remember was Incredible Code Man, which was kind of like a 3D Pac-Man sort of title, and there was even a really kind of in-depth sort of RPG that was kind of like a bit of a Zelda sort of game called Terra Incognita. That was really cool, and I really enjoyed playing it. You also had Haunted Maze, which was like zombies running around a maze, also kind of like Pac-Man. Blitter Boy, which was like a shooting one, which is kind of cool. So there was loads of classics there, and I'm really looking forward to playing them in the next part of this video when I get to play through the demo disc for issue 42 of the magazine. But yeah, I would love to have seen this go and advance into the PS2, 3, 4 and 5, and it's a shame they never did, because it would have been really fun to see what they could have done with it. But anyway, now we get into the big meat and bones of the magazine, the review section. But just before that, let's take a look at the advert for the mail order for games here, and there's some great bargains here. So you can get a PS1 for $199.99 with 2 pads, DualShock controllers, a memory card, and then 3 $37.99 games of your choice. That is an absolute steal. You could get 3 brand new games, 2 £20 DualShock controllers, and a memory card. Man, that's brilliant. So here is the biggest draw of the magazine for me, the Metal Gear Solid review. So I'm just going to try and read this out as the pages go along. So here we go. It starts with, if you buy one game in 1999, make sure it's Metal Gear Solid. The odds of there being another game as fulfilling, rewarding, and exquisitely surprising as this before the year's out are cheers wire slim. Stop reading. Go and buy it now. Metal Gear Solid is an action game which you play on your PlayStation, and just like its Hollywood inspiration, it has a tightly scripted plot and a whole host of brilliant set pieces, yet you never feel as if you're just watching the action unfold. You're making it happen. Dedicate a couple of hours at night to the game, opening every door, taking out every guard, examining and using and having fun with every gadget, and you'll be in raptures for a fortnight. However, playing Metal Gear for 12 hours solid and you'll finish it, which presents us with 2 of the game's problems. First of all, how does PSM review a game where divulging any of the details will conceivably spoil your enjoyment and shave another hour off the playtime? And secondly, how can we recommend shelling out for a game that, in the hands of persistent, rash and uninterested gamers, could be finished on the same day it was brought? We'll deal with that point in the next bit. Firstly, we'll just have to sneak the cat out of the bag a couple of times, but we'll draw a gaze-like veil over some of the tastier and more bizarre surprises. You can avoid any potential upset by stopping reading now. That's now. We said now. now, right now, right? Secondly, we implore you to glean every ounce worth out of the game, not to rush headlong from one end to the other, not to ignore or skip FMV cutscenes or dialogues, not to leave any area unexplored. So yeah, they're concerned about the length, basically. And they said they're not going to spoil anything, but I didn't think that when I turned to the next page, they would literally spoil the whole fucking game. I was really pissed off because I was looking forward to reading it and just seeing what the game was like to play, not what it was all about. But here, on this double-page spread, they literally highlight every key thing in the game kind of thing with screenshots of each bit. And right at the bottom right-hand corner, there's 2 clips from the actual ending. Oh my God, just stupid. I don't know why you would do that. So they go on to say that Metal Gear Solid is like none of your other games. They say describing it as a combination of Tomb Raider, Resident Evil, Die Hard, Under Siege, and every James Bond film ever goes some way to pervading the game's ethos. Snake is steered best with the analog stick around 3D areas, of which there are around 50, each around the size of a trio of football pitches. Exit each one and the next is loaded. Die during your attempts to cross the blast furnace or heliport and so on, and you're dumped back at the point where you entered. Each area is filled with security cameras, hidden trapdoors, landmines, and most famously patrolling guards with guns. Picking your way through each area, perhaps finding and picking up some infrared goggles or shaft grenades, is therefore fraught with danger, and we're sure you're aware by now, wading in with guns blazing is not the way forward in Metal Gear. So at least they realise that you can do it in different ways and you can approach it in different ways, but you're better off being stealthily. And I like what games and films they compare it to. So yeah, they go on to say the name of the game here is Stealth. They say guards can happily patrol until they hear a noise or until you foolishly cross their line of sight, where they will break off their path and come and investigate. A comical question mark above their head shows their intention. If they spot you, this is placed by an exclamation mark. And a short Skyrim squirrels and your jaw shot nearly jumps out of your hands. And his mates come running and then set shooting you to death. So that's kind of cool. They go on about... It sounds like you only usually put back a matter of yards when you die and start the area, but minor setbacks are preferable to huge losses and health and misaimed ammo. But they would have preferred it if the penalties had been far greater, so that the game would have lasted longer, and the ability to save makes it easier and easier, they say. So they say the plot is as convoluted and fanciful as that of any Steven Seagal flick, and one that is dished out at regular intervals with the codec. And you can also see on this page that I've just scrolled through, they also show all the characters and bios for them. And on the next double spread of it, they talk more about the game. So let's have a look. They say the game is littered by what can only be described as post-gaming age curious and highly original turns of gameplay. For example, even the built-in training mode helps bolster MGS's position as more than just a game. Rather than featuring all in-game scenery for the training missions, they are created using cheesy computer graphic VR imagery, as if admitting that this section of MGS is just a game, but thereby suggesting that the rest of the experience is real. So that's kind of cool. Yeah, it's really cool. They also talk about mailing the radio operator. The game uses the best use of the analog stick since Gran Turismo. One particular instance being so clever as to make you want to applaud, which is obviously the torture scenes and the Psycho Mantis bits. They talk about getting into a box disguised and to travel around in it. They talk about stealth suits. They kind of just spoil everything, and unfortunately they also spoil the CD trick with Psycho Mantis, as they say you're told that there's a radio fingerprint written on the CD case, and after padding around for hours looking for it, you realise it's actually on the CD case of the game. And I just think that was really stupid to spoil that, because that's a really key thing, and sadly I knew that going in, and I really should have just heeded their spoiler warning and just not read it, but I was so excited and I needed to see it. Another cool thing, they also go through all the game ranks that you can get, and they tell you how you can do it, which is pretty neat. There was a nice little reference to look back after I finished it and see how I could get the other ranks. They also go on to talk about the weapons that you can get, the sniper rifle and the tablets, and they also mention that the best weapon to have is the cardboard boxes and how you can travel around and hide from guards in those, which is kind of cool. They say that, you see, the Japanese like games short and easy. They like to play it for a bit, win, and feel good about themselves, which makes Metal Gear their favourite game. It's as linear as a film, packed with as much dialogue, and you spend lots of time listening to and watching rather than playing. And as stated, you can, if you want to, finish it in a game. The first time they played it, they clocked up 20 hours, the second time 12, and the third under 8, and they compared it to Resident Evil 3 for the lifespan. So they sort of end it with the last sort of paragraph saying, one last thought, just in case you're still worried about the longevity and wonder if Metal Gear is worth the cash, go and play the demo, and now try and tell us that you don't want to play another 46 areas. Exactly. So they give it graphics a 10, and they say high gloss, high fidelity, perfection. Gameplay, they also give a 10. They say it's exciting, gripping, frighteningly original fun. For the lifespan, they give it an 8, saying big enough, but only just. And overall, they give it a 10 out of 10, and they say it's the best game ever made, packing gameplay, graphics, and originality triple punch. It's unputdownable while it lasts, and unforgettable when it's finished. And to be honest, I think that last sentence there perfectly sums this game up. It's definitely unputdownable while you're playing it, and it's definitely unforgettable when it's finished. I couldn't agree more with that last sentiment, though I think they were a bit stupid to go on that sort of long, sort of winded speech about how short it is, because the whole point of it is watching the cutscenes and playing. And if you watch all the cutscenes, it is a long game, and there's fair length to it, to be fair. And it has a lot of replay value, going back and getting the bandana, the stealth suit, the VR missions and all that stuff. So I think they were stupid to focus loads on that. So another review is Akuji The Heartless, which is like a 3D Tomb Raider kind of game. They gave that an 8 out of 10. Reaver Football, which I never heard of, but they gave that a 7. And they said, what should be a dream ticket to football heaven ends up with Twin Tower disappointment. But there's another football one after that, Sensible Soccer, which gets an even worse score of 2 out of 10. And they say, a dreadful release, the playability of the Amiga game was its strongest aspect, and it's noticeably absent here. Numerous fundamental flaws heap on the misery. The playability of the Amiga Classic is lost. The Queen Mom will last longer, as the lifespan scored 2. That's what they say. Fucking hell. So yeah, moving on, we've got a couple more reviews. Poi Poi 2, which I've never heard of, but it got a 7 out of 10. Another football game, loads of football games this month, jeez. Pool Hustler, and then the one that I wanted to talk about was Hugo, which was a sort of 2D platforming game for little ones. Yeah, wow. So they gave it a 2 out of 10, and they say devilishly toss an outside latrine of a game which should never be visited. Hold it in and frequent a premier commode like Spyro. They gave the graphics 3, saying it was big, bold and colourful, like Pat Butcher from EastEnders. Gameplay a 1. If there is a place beyond boring, they say, it's here. And the lifespan 1, 4 minutes and 48 seconds. Is that really how long it took? Oh my word. Jeez. I mean, it just looks terrible anyway. I don't know why anyone would want to get that, and just unlucky if you actually got that from like a parent or a relative off for like your Christmas or birthday present. You'd definitely be disappointed with that. It looks absolutely terrible. Just looks like a bunch of weird mini games or something. Yes, definitely a strange one. Not one for me, that's for sure. Jeez. Oh my word. After sitting through distreveled cutscenes and twiddling your bits during loading times, it's back to basics. Jump or duck, up or down, play or bin. They never held back in this magazine, which is kind of what I liked. Even though it was an official one, it was still kind of edgy. So moving on, we have the cheats section, which is sort of like a pull-out thing that you can take out. So there's a bunch of cheats this month. There's Tomb Raider 3, Tenchu. They don't have the naked cheat for Tomb Raider, so yeah, that's no good. You also have a Tokka guide, which I don't really get how you can really write, and a Crash Bandicoot one, which was kind of crap, to be honest. It just really doesn't say much. Like this one here, look, gee whiz, this level introduces the wizard enemy. This is a particularly nasty enemy who fires out magic spells that are tricky to avoid. Other than these, the rest of the level is fairly easy, with just the usual flogs, knights and goats to avoid. The box gem is very straightforward too. The only moment where you might suffer is right at the end when you have to hit an exclamation box, which is surrounded by nitro boxes. Make sure you are clear of them all, especially the ones behind you. And like, I know Crash was a linear game, but Christ, that really doesn't help. That's such a weak one. And like, that Making Waves one as well. Another first is a jet bike level. It can be quite easy to get lost here, so keep an eye on the arrow at the top of the screen. It shows you the direction to take. The main danger on these levels is the floating bombs. Some of these move and some stay still. Other hazards to avoid include the bombs that are fired by the ships, rowing boats, and exceedingly annoying men who wield anchors. Like, great, what a guide that was. Jesus. So moving on from that, we get the A to Z section, and this stayed in the magazine for quite a while. It's basically just a directory with all of their reviews in alphabetical order, which I thought was kind of cool. You get like a sentence for each one, and it gives you the score, which is kind of neat. They also have sections on the sides for top 5 racing games or RPG action adventure games or platformers or whatever. And here we have one where it's like Broken Sword, 9 out of 10, Final Fantasy 7, 10 out of 10, Resi 2, 9 out of 10, Tomb Raider 3, 10 out of 10, and Wild Arms, 9 out of 10 for the 5 best adventure RPG games on the PlayStation 1. Okay. So yeah, that was a cool section. We also get to see here a page where it shows you the UK charts as shown by game, and there's also a voucher for £5 off, which has sadly expired in February 1999. But at this point in this year, Tomb Raider 3 was top of the charts, so I'm guessing it had its like November release just the year before, and it held over Christmas. FIFA 99 is second, so obviously that one and Tomb Raider were probably battling it out for the Christmas number 1, and then January's month, it was still there in the top of the chart. Crash 3 is in 3rd, Tocker was in 4th, and Abe's Exodus was in 5th. So that's kind of cool. The next page is one that I always love seeing. It was Gameplay's order page. So this was like a mail order online store that you could buy things from. I used to get all my sort of games from here because they were really cheap, to be fair. And they also had loads of other things like these awesome memory cards that were like 10 in 1, and these big bulky memory cards that were just awesome, and you could buy light guns and all sorts of things from them. And sadly they're not around anymore, but they were a great company when they were going back in the PS1 days. So towards the back end of the magazine, we get the demo pages where it shows you all the controls and talks about the demos. Then we get some classified ads, and finally we get to the letters page. And this was always fun because they were quite cheeky with the letters. So there's one here about Thrill Kill, which was a beat 'em up that got banned in this country because it was really violent and just horrendous. But it wasn't that bad because I played it and I got it. So the guy says, once again, the games industry has chosen to treat us like children. I thought the PlayStation was at the forefront of creating games for older gamers such as myself. Yet it is insulting to think that in this day and age, I am still not allowed to choose for myself what I should and shouldn't play. What am I talking about? Thrill Kill. According to your information, EA has purchased various Virgin Interactive properties. You then went on to say that the game in question will not be released on the grounds of decency and taste. Now, I have no objection to being careful about the subject matter of games being suitable for the correct age ratings. By all means, give the game a strict age certificate. Slap as many not suitable for children stickers on it as you want. Restrict the number of outlets it's sold at. But for heaven's sake, release the damn game. There are those of us who are not so easily offended and are mature enough to know that this is just a game. From what I could see, the game had a twisted sense of humour about the whole thing. It's not like it was advocating a way of life or something. I don't think people will be playing the game and suddenly thinking, hey, I want to go out dressed up as a midget and kill people. But if they do, then I'd very much doubt the problem lies with the game. I am just like any other person. The games in my home would take pride in place of any PlayStation owner's collection. All quality games, with the exception of Resident Evil 2, none of which would be claimed as overly violent or disturbing. For me, a game does not have to be brimming over with blood and gore. But if it is, then leave it be. And that's kind of fair, to be fair. It depends on the person, don't it? You shouldn't have to ban the game. You should be able to buy it and just restrict it like he said. So kind of a level-headed opinion there, I think. Another one that I liked was the under 12s letter here. So it says, I have a suggestion to improve your magazine. Why don't you get together a group of under 12s and ask them to write about games for under 12s, because they are under 12s and know what other under 12s want and will enjoy. And then the response from the magazine is, your letter is unfortunately the reason why under 12s don't write for the under 12s about games the under 12s might be interested in. You use the phrase under 12 4 times in 46 words. Afraid it doesn't make for great reading. Perhaps you might be interested in our brand new sister title, PlayStation Max, which is very much cater for the under 12s, which is kind of harsh. So yeah, and then it ends with a real cool tease for the next issue, which I always loved. Sometimes I would just get the magazine and instantly go to the back page and see what the next month was. So it shows you what's going to be reviewed and then the games on the disc. And sometimes they would change, but for the most part they were right. So that is a brief look at the magazine. I hope you enjoyed it. Tune in next week when I take a look at the games on the demo. Cheers.